Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament Gospels, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. And today we're looking at Jesus agonizing in the garden. The last few, really week and a half, we've been in John and looking at the teachings that Jesus gave his disciples and his apostles as he was going through getting ready for his crucifixion, getting ready for his arrest, and trying to teach him the things that he needed to teach him in the last minute. And so here we're gonna look at him praying as they were on their way to the Mount of Olives, and so we're going to look at him praying once he gets there. And so I'm coming from Luke for this one. I typically go through Matthew because Matthew does go into more detail, but I like Luke's account here, and there's a couple reasons why. We'll look at some of the things that Matthew talks about as well. So Luke 22 verse 39 says, "Then, accompanied by the disciples, Jesus left the upstairs room and went as usual to the Mount of Olives. There he told them, 'Pray that you will not give in to the temptation.' He walked away about a stone's throw and knelt down and prayed, 'Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine.' Then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. He prayed more fervently, and he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood. At last he stood up again and returned to the disciples, only to find them asleep, exhausted from grief. 'Why are you sleeping?' he asked them. 'Get up and pray so that you will not be given into temptation.'" And so Matthew goes into a little bit more detail here. He talks about how Jesus goes to, three times to pray to God about what he was about to go through, and we see that this is not something that Jesus really wanted to do, and we're gonna look at that. And so Jesus, he expresses his true feelings here, but he did not deny or rebel against God's will, and that's the key thing here, right? I'd say in this way, he had a lot of questions, he had some doubts, and if you look at it, he didn't want to do this. I mean, he really didn't want to do this, but he says, "Not my will, but your will be done." And so, we can see here if it was up to God, if Jesus' will, he probably wouldn't have gone through with this, but he was doing what God had called him to do. And so that's the wonderful thing that we see about this is sometimes there's things we don't want to do, or we may be struggling with, or not wanting to go through, but because we're doing God's will, we're going to go through 'em and do them. Again, not something we wanted to do from a human nature or human standpoint, but it is something that we do as Christians. And so he reaffirmed his desire to do what God wanted. And I want to go back to this because we've seen it in a lot of instances where I've seen, like growing up, this was a big thing I saw. It's like you weren't allowed to question God, or you weren't allowed to ask questions, period. Really, there was a lot of teachings in a lot of times where I sat in with teachers who were like, if you ask questions, then they would get on to you and scorn you because, well, your faith isn't strong enough, or you just need to believe. Like, I'm teaching this. This is, you need to believe what I'm teaching and stuff like that. And what I've learned later on is they didn't know the answer to the questions that I was asking, and so or they couldn't answer them, and so it was just, you need to accept what's being taught. Well, that's not a good way to develop faith. And so it's good to ask questions in the right manner. I mean, we see Jesus at questioning here, right? He's questioning God about what he's about to go do, and he's trying to get out of it. It's like, hey, is there a way we can do this a different way? And so the one thing we see, and so I want to include that. I'm sorry, I wanted to include that because I want people to understand that it's not okay to, or I mean, I'm sorry, that it is okay to ask questions. It is okay to, you know, question God. As long as we do it in the right manner and we don't rebel, right, or deny God's will. And that's the key thing that we got to look at here. And so Jesus's prayer highlights the terrible suffering that he was about to endure, and agony so much more magnified because he was going to take on the sins of the whole world. And that's the crazy thing. He knew what he was about to walk onto. He talks about this cup, this cup. He was wanting to pass this cup before him. It was the agony of, and also alienation from God, his Father, at the cross. And if you can read about that in Hebrews 5 verses 7 through 9. So here's the thing, right? And yes, the suffering that Christ was about to go through was bad, right? The Romans were really good at killing people. They had perfected how to kill people slowly. They were really good at doing that. But the thing is the biggest thing that was going to was one, taking all the sins of the world, but two, the separation from God. I think that was the biggest thing that he was struggling with, was that he was going to literally go through hell because he was going to be separated from God. And we're going to see that on the cross. And so Um, we see that the sinless Son took all of our sins and was separated for a while from God so that we could be eternally saved. And that separation was literally hell for Jesus. He took hell on for us. And because we're the ones who, if it weren't for him, would be eternally separated from God. And so Jesus asked the disciples, like while he was doing this, he asked them to pray, right, that they wouldn't fall into temptation because he knew what they were like, he would soon be leaving him and he knew what they were about to go through. Jesus also knew that they would need the extra strength to face some of the temptations ahead, right? Temptations to run away or to deny the relationship with him, all that kind of stuff. There was going to be a lot of things that happened. They were about to see Jesus die. They were about to see their Messiah die. And so one of the questions would be, well, would they still think he was the Messiah? Can someone kill the Messiah? Right? I mean, he's God. He shouldn't be able to die. And so the disciples' strongest temptation would undoubtedly be to think that they had been deceived, right? And to walk away and be like, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm not having nothing to do with this guy. And so that's the thing that we have to look at and we have to go through and see that, hey, man, they were going to be tempted too. They were going to struggle too. And so he's telling them, hey, go and pray, to pray for strength, pray that you get through this time as well, because it's going to be hard for you. Obviously much harder for what Jesus was about to go through, but it was going to be hard for his disciples as well. And then one interesting thing we see here is that Luke is the only one who tells us about God, or about Jesus, I'm sorry, sweating drops of blood. And so you have to think like how much stress and agony he would have been in. So basically what happens is you become so stressed that the blood vessels in your pores burst, right? And they can they burst, and so then you just go into this. So whenever you sweat, it's just so much agony, so much stress that you're actually sweating drops of blood. It's blood mixed with sweat. And so that gives us an idea of how much agony that he would have been in to do this. And man, it's just, but you realize that, and he still didn't give up or give in. And so he went ahead with his mission for which he came. And so again, we see in Matthew that he went to God 3 times to pray that this cup be moved from him. Right? I mean, we see he was like, he was wanting another way. He's like, there's got to be another way, but there wasn't. And so he says, not my will, but your will be done. He's sitting there saying, look, I don't want to do this, but this is what you've sent me here for to do, and I'm going to fulfill my mission. And thankfully for us, he went through with it. Thankfully for all of us that are Christians and who have put our faith in him, he went through with this and paid for our sins. And that's the ultimate thing we need to see here. So I hope you see this side of Jesus, his human side come out here, because we forget sometimes that yes, he was God, but he was also human at the same time. And so he had all the human emotions. He had to deal with all the human things, the questions, the doubts, that kind of stuff. And so we see it, and so we can relate to that. Now again, I couldn't have gone through what he went through. I don't think I would have done it, but you know, he was strong enough to go through it for our sakes, in which we really need to appreciate. And so I just hope you take appreciation of what he went through before this, and still went through with the allowing himself to be crucified. It's just a wonderful, wonderful story that we see here, and something we need to be greatly appreciative for. As always, I appreciate everyone for watching. I appreciate those who've been following along and commenting and messaging me and giving, asking questions, that kind of stuff. I love that kind of conversation. So it's really been helpful. I hope this has been beneficial to you. If it is, share it, and people can go back through and watch. We got it in a series, and so you can watch them in order that way as well. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please go ahead and do that. We're going to continue to do different studies, and we'll dive down into those as we do them. But that way you get alerts and notifications. But as always, I appreciate everyone for watching.